Women. What's something a man has done that made you think, wow, he stands out in a really great way? When my now husband and I had been dating for a couple months, it somehow came up that the house I was renting didn't have any carbon monoxide detectors. He didn't like that and said he was going to get one and install it for me. I was like, okay, sure, and probably forgot about it. And then the next week, we lived about an hour and a half apart and only saw each other on weekends. He showed up with two and installed them before we went to dinner. It wasn't just that he cared about my safety, it was that he said he was going to do something and then did it at the first opportunity. I've had a fair amount of people in my life who promise a lot but never deliver, so the fact that he did, well, that meant a lot. A bit later, we were starting to get more serious and he had gotten a new job after recently being laid off. He was talking about his future and that he might sell his house and buy a new one in a year or two, and I said, oh, what would you be looking for? He replied, well, if we're still together, hopefully we'd be ready to live together, so if you still have the same job, something halfway between our current places so neither of us have a terrible commute. And I figure you won't want all of my WoW stuff displayed in the living room like it is now, so I'll need a man cave. And if I have a space that's all mine like that, it's only fair that you do too. So there should be a room you can turn into a craft room or a library or whatever you want. I was blown away. No one had ever shown me such consideration and thoughtfulness like that. Factored me into their plans without prompting and actually thinking about what I might want. I told him I loved him for the first time 2 weeks later. And yes, our house has both a man cave for him and a library for me. Lord God, when... Story 2. I was 17, went out with a fake ID, started talking to a considerably older guy. Naturally, I attributed his interest to my maturity, sophistication, and poise beyond my years. When he stepped away from me for a minute, another man, total stranger, approached just long enough to tell me, you're obviously not old enough to be here. That guy you're talking to is not a good guy. You should go home. I'll call you a cab if you need one. The creep came back, and as soon as I started showing hesitation about him, he became incredibly pushy, trying to get me to go somewhere alone with him. I insisted on getting a cab, and he tried to get me to tell him my address, to tell the driver. I ducked him and got in the cab. I'll never know exactly what the stranger saved me from that night, but it wasn't going to be good. I don't even remember his face, but I still think about him sometimes. Pretty sure it was her guardian angel. Story 3. I grew up in an environment where arguments were loud, shouting to get a point across. So it was something I thought was the norm. The first argument with my boyfriend, now husband, was very mature and he never once yelled. He was empathetic and heard me out and put his points across calmly, without making me feel bad. We ended up having a constructive conversation and resolved it calmly, and got ice cream after. 4 years later, he still never once yelled at me. I also don't yell, but that's because I'm a crier. See, lads, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. Story 4. I was hanging around my boyfriend at the time who was bragging about who was cheating on me. The next night when we were all hanging out in a group, he asked if I'd like to go on a walk with him before I went home for the night because he wanted to talk to me about something. He told me everything my boyfriend said about the girl because you deserve to know. He bought me soda and talked to me while I processed it and never once made me feel like he was preying on that circumstance like people sometimes do. Story 5. I had a rough life growing up, and it was still rough when I met him. Friends had fallen away and were off to their own lives. I was working in a call center. I was working triple or double shifts to survive in my apartment alone. My family isn't even a question on the table. I'd just been alone for a long time. I met this guy on a dating app. I've been on a ton of awful dates, as one does when trying to find your person on an app, but this one guy I saw had these pics of him in a hat way too small for his head and a couple of other photos I found endearing. We messaged for a long time, and it wasn't a hollow conversation. Real conversations that weren't ended in one-word replies. After some time and me giving up on dating for a bit, I deleted my app or account, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. So a few weeks later, I made the account again and found him. We planned a date that week. He showed up to our first day with a small gift bag. Inside was a small 3D printed dino. He stood there in the sunset that evening telling me that he didn't know if I would like him, aka continue to see and date him. Should my birthday come in a month, and he wanted to give me a birthday present now, just in case. He remembered my birthday. He remembered every detail from our conversations. He remembered I said I love dinosaurs. Made me cry that night as I hadn't gotten a gift from anyone in a very, very, very long time. It was given with love. He's my husband, 7 years happy and going on till the end of time. God, when? Part 2. Story 6. My now husband, after a few weeks of dating, showed up with a journal he'd picked out. I mentioned in passing I'd liked writing. It was just a nice gesture. He saw it, thought of me, and handed it to me without fanfare as he picked me up for dinner. It was the listening, the thoughtfulness especially for my interest, and the modest way he did it where he didn't need me to make a big deal about his gesture. It was a sign he'd be interested in me and thoughtful in small ways, I thought. 20 years in, I was right, and it is held true. I'm not even going to say anything anymore. Story 7. Certain guys will always stand out for me even years after we dated. Guy number 1 offered to walk me to my car in a parking garage without me asking. Guy number 2 was a really great communicator. Not just a conversation that flows so easily, but I never had to wonder if a long silence meant he was pulling back because he'd established his honesty enough where I knew he'd just come out and tell me rather than play games. Guy number 3 brought me coffee at work when I was having a hard day, and I almost cried from how unexpected the gesture was. He worked in the building next door and took time out of his day to stop, get my normal order, and then found a way to get it to me without disrupting my day so that the kindness didn't become a hassle instead. Story 8. When my husband and I first started dating, we went out to dinner. It was raining outside and there was a homeless man seeking shelter in the front entrance. People were laughing and being mean to him, and my then boyfriend invited him to sit with us and order whatever he wanted from the menu and buy his dinner. Knew I wanted to marry him that night. The nice man gave us random trinkets from his shopping cart, and we still have them to this day. Story 9. Guy here, but my guess is my wife would share this story. We went to college together and lived in separate apartments across town from each other. One day she was having a particularly rough time and was very much looking forward to just hanging out on the couch with me that night watching crappy TV. Unfortunately, at around 4 that day, a big snowstorm rolled through, so we canceled plans to hang out, which just made her day worse. Without telling her, I packed a backpack, bundled up like I was going on an Antarctic expedition, and walked to her apartment. Thankfully, another student saw me walking in the snow and gave me a ride part of the way because I vastly underestimated the distance between our apartments. I get to her apartment, text her, saying I have a joke to cheer her up. Knock, knock. Who's there? Me. Knocks. She still talks about it to this day, almost 15 years later. Story 10. Great self-control. We were in a meeting at work, and this guy, actually a very competent person, was getting unfairly roasted by his superior who needed to put someone down. The guy just stood there stoically and neither crushed nor winced. He let the superior finish his nonsense and then moved with his presentation. No reply, no defending himself, no apology. Kindness, but not the naive, pacifying kind. The type of kindness where you have a lot of power, know incriminating things about a person, and yet choose not to harm them. I was, or am, in awe. Yep, couldn't be me. Story 11. This is not my personal experience, but rather what I have witnessed and know about a dear friend's significant other. So, my friend and her significant other have been together for 31 years now, since my friend was 19. And the first time I met him and spent some time with him, I immediately knew that he was an amazing man, and madly in love with my friend. The way he was so attentive to her all night, but not in a controlling way. Making sure she wasn't cold and asking her if she didn't want his jacket. The tender, passionate gazing at her, especially when she was talking about something she loved. The soft caressing of her back, holding her hand and stepping in front of her as a big guy who looked disturbed and disturbing, really looked like the man had mental issues, started walking fast towards them to protect my friend. And then the things I know he does because my friend has told me, the most significant ones being, he loves taking care of the house, although he works full-time just like her and does martial arts 3 times a week, dishwashing, vacuuming, cleaning the bathroom, etc., and really loves to cook. He loves to cook the things she loves, especially because she hates cooking. When they have a child, he did everything except feed their baby, and my friend didn't even need to ask him to help her. He simply did it. Whether it was giving the baby a bath, changing his diapers, picking him up when he was crying, etc., whenever my friend was busy or not feeling well. And when my friend's mother was very ill and my friend and her 2 siblings took turns staying with her mother because she refused to go to a hospice, and they could only hire professional help if one of them was present the entire time, and taking care of her, doing everything for her. My friend's significant other took turns too and took care of his mother-in-law, whom he always called Mom. Although his mom was still alive and he loved her, the best way that he could. My friend has truly been blessed beyond measure with a man she shares her life with and has a son with. But that's because she deserves him. She's an amazing person too. And the last time I met up with him, a couple of years ago, he still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. I bet he looks at her that way every single day. God, when? Part 3. Story 12. Was an ex of mine. We went on a second day in the city without realizing it was match day, and it was heaving. He told me he's really uncomfortable with the crowds, so I was fully expecting him to lean on me throughout the day. Instead, he took my hand and led us through the crowds. This man told me he has a phobia and he pushed through it for me. I found it such a sweet gesture, and I wish I'd told him at the time as we didn't last much longer than that. But why though? Story 13. It is my now husband. Feels so good to say that, lol. I am in tech and I usually work from home. However, I go to the office occasionally. This time was for a brainstorm meeting for an important project we wanted to undergo. I was the project leader along with someone else, and everyone was brainstorming, but also asking me a bunch of questions, and I felt really overwhelmed as I don't like being the center of attention at all, even though I lead pretty well, I'd say. I texted him after the meeting, about 2 hours before close of day. The meeting was hectic, and I was overwhelmed, trying to make light of it. This man legit saw my message and took a bus to my workplace. It takes 1.5 hours to get there by bus. When I closed from work and went to my car, I saw him standing there looking at me with those pretty hazel eyes of his, and I just felt so loved at that point. He opened his arms and we hugged for a long time. I was just taking in his scent. Asked him why he was there because I hate feeling like someone inconveniences themselves for me, and he was just like, I know you well to know that you would be overthinking everything you said in that meeting, so I'm here to take you home. You want to go watch the sunset before we go? It took everything to not just cry. I love that guy. Story 14. This is about two guys, actually. I'm a football or soccer fanatic. I've always wanted my favorite football team's jersey since I was about 13. It was a luxury I couldn't afford because we struggled a lot financially. In uni, two of my male friends, besties, went 50-50 on a football jersey and my favorite team for my birthday. So teams have a home, away, and third kid. They sneakily get information out of me to figure out which one I'd want. So whilst I thought we were just having a casual convo about our team's kits, they were extracting information out of me. I damn near cried when I opened the gift. That season, my team went on to win the Champions League. I plan to have the jersey framed. Those are friends for life. Story 15. It made me feel heard. I was new to this group of people and I'm fairly introverted and naturally soft-spoken. The people around me were great and fun people, but the first time I tried to speak up, I was accidentally spoken over. I felt so awkward and embarrassed. But he noticed, and he said really kindly to the person who accidentally interrupted me, "Oh, hey, sorry, but I think Opie was trying to say something." And the guy that interrupted me apologized profusely, and they all seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. I'd never felt so valued amongst a group of already established friends. It made me feel heard. Didn't make me or anyone at the table feel awkward, and I got to speak up. Thanks to him, I grew closer to these amazing people and found my voice amongst them. He rarely has to step in again, but he's done it for me and for others on many occasions. Such an amazing guy. Story 16. My husband. We were friends before we started dating, and I'd go around to his place for drinks with a few others on the weekends. One night, his kinda stepbrother was there, and his phone got a message. My husband passed it to him and gave him a little tease about it, possibly being a girl. Then he said to him, "I hope you're not talking to more than one girl, because that's not cool." Meaning flirting or chatting up. It was very genuine when he said it, and it wasn't to impress me. Kinda stepbrother? What is a kinda stepbrother? Story 17. I met my husband when we were 17. Our first interaction was very uplifting. I passed a test. Our teacher would say if we passed out loud and would basically say, "Name, pass." And when my husband heard I passed, he looked at me, said, "Wow, awesome, good job." And I was like, "Thanks." Didn't really know him. Thought he was attractive, and it was a nice little thing for someone I didn't know to be rooting for me. I did that often when I passed a test. Gave me a high five, and eventually he squeezed in my conversation with my friend at the time. Then we ended up exchanging socials. He's very charismatic, and his way of asking for my socials was, "Oh, is he your best friend? I think I could have best friend him. You don't have his socials? Well, you have mine, and I'll be the better best friend." Definitely an excuse for my husband to get my socials and slide in my DMs in the most cheeky way. How? He messaged me, "Slide. I just slid in your DMs." He continues to court me, and one thing I absolutely love is how he'll open my door for me. He has then and still does. It's just a little thing that fills my heart with joy. He welded me those metal welded flowers with a love note on it saying how his love for me will pass when the flower does, and much more, of course. That love note is on our fridge. We're 24 now, and I can't wait to continue living life with this man. Story 18. I'd had a really rough day and communicated with him that I wouldn't be very chatty while I processed my thoughts. He sent a lovely message, saying he was there when I was ready to talk. Later that evening, he called me and asked me to go to my front door. He had traveled nearly an hour and a half to leave flowers on my doorstep just to make me smile. The sweetest thing was that he wasn't waiting at my door. He was in his car at the end of the road, ready to drive back home because he was respecting my wish for my space to process what happened. Obviously, I did ask him to turn around and we talked for a while. He comforted me and then went home. That kind of care and respect just makes me realize how lucky I am to have him in my life. Story 19. Everything about my fiancé is a green flag, but what first struck me about him was his attitude about life. He calls every weekend a vacation and absolutely treats it as such. He has such a positive outlook that I can't help but try to find the good in things, too. He's the biggest supporter of everyone he loves. If you're taking a picture, he's up there shining his phone to help you get better lighting. He'll sit at your feet and pass you your baby shower gifts. He's 100% himself no matter who he's with. And he's the only man my sister has ever liked. Which says a lot because she has hated every single boyfriend of mine since I was 16. He jumped at the opportunity to help my mom and I take care of my stepdad as he was suffering from cancer. He helped us through some of the worst days of our lives. And we had only been dating a few months at this point. My mom actually pulled me aside during that trip and said, "That is a man you marry." I've always dated horrible men, and for my family to see his kindness and encourage me to lean into him was everything. Story 20. My friends and I were attending a wedding and we're all staying in a big Airbnb. While we were getting ready to do hair and makeup, one of the guys in the group steamed his fiance's dress and then went room to room to pick up and steam all the other women's dresses. He then delivered the dresses back to each room a few minutes later. He said he noticed his fiancée forgot to pack the steamer, so he put it in his suitcase because he had extra space. Once he warmed the steamer up for her dress, he figured he'd steam all the dresses since he had extra time. When we attended a steamer couple's wedding later that year, another boyfriend in the group Airbnb steamed all the dresses, so it's become a fun friend group tradition. Story 21. My current partner never got the chance to meet my dad, who passed away several years before we started dating. I woke up around 11 on a Saturday morning in January to him putting a coffee on my nightstand that he had just picked up from the Dunkin' across the street. I noticed when he kissed me that his nose and hands were ice cold, and as it turns out, that was because he had de-iced, shoveled, and salted my entire driveway while I slept. On its own, braving the Boston winter cold to do that for me would be sweet enough, but my partner also knows that my dad passed away after a fall in an unsalted driveway. He got into bed with me and wrapped me in his arms and said, "I don't want to make you sad by bringing it up, but just know that whenever I see ice, I think about your dad. Always make sure your driveway is safe." I don't really know what I believe, but I do genuinely think that my dad was looking out for me the day I met my partner. Story 22. I'm not even a woman, but it was one of my homies. I've known this dude for many years. One of my inner circle. Former musician turned successful producer. One of the guys he produces is a top 10 country artist. He's always been that dude. Super good looking. Women flock to him. Piece of crap, basically. Lol, he's a great husband to an amazing wife. Anyway, we all live in different parts of the country, so if he has a show nearby, he usually gets us tickets. His guy had a show at a big venue in the Bay Area, and we got backstage passes. Oh man, what a day, but that's another story. During the show, the artist told everyone to grab their lady and dance for the next song. There was a young woman in the front row with her parents who didn't have anyone to dance with. My buddy has security lift her chair over the security divider so he can dance with her. This girl was over the moon. The artist even called it out during the song and she was on the big jumbotron. Never looked at that dude the same again. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 23. Early on after my ex and I first met, he leaned over to kiss me. I gently pushed him away and said I wasn't there and just wanted to be friends for the time being. For the month that followed, we hung out a lot as friends and he didn't make another move. We got closer and one night we ended up cuddling and watching TV. After a couple of hours, he asked me if he could kiss me and didn't move as he was waiting for my response first. It might seem small, but as a person who experienced mistreatments, this simple act of acknowledging my autonomy over my body meant everything to me. We were together for 6 years and never did he ever make me feel unsafe with him. Story 24. Not my spouse, but just a friend I have huge respect for, because I think it's important to include ways men can stand out in contexts that aren't romantic. I always make sure everyone in a group feels comfortable and included, even people who are a little more shy or new to a group. I knew we could be friends when we met because of how respectful and thoughtful he was toward other people, and everyone in our group friend feels the same way. He sets the tone for interactions and will always gently rebuke if someone says or does something not kind, sexist, off-color, etc. He holds people accountable to be good to one another and has created an atmosphere in our friend group that we all feel proud of and work to maintain. Story 25. I've posted this here before, but this is one of the many reasons I knew my husband was the one. I get migraines. They were quite severe in my younger years. My husband and I lived about an hour apart from each other when we were dating, so we generally saw each other only on the weekends. One weekend, he drove down, and about an hour after he arrived, I could feel a migraine coming on quickly. I told him I wasn't feeling well with a migraine and needed to sleep it off for a few hours, but he was welcome to stay and help himself to anything in the house if he wanted to. About 10 minutes later, this wave of nausea came over me and I made it as far as the bathroom sink before I threw up. I tried to clean it up, but the sink was clogged and I just wasn't in a place to handle it at the moment. So, came out, said, "Hey, use the other bathroom if you need to. The sink is clogged in here. I'll handle it later tonight." I went back to my room, shut the lights, closed the door, and slept for about 3 hours. Got up, felt better, and went out to talk to my now husband. Told him I was feeling better and we could go do something once I cleaned up the sink. He said, "Don't worry, I already took care of it." The P-trap was actually clogged, so I took it apart, cleaned it, and it's draining fine now. I was like, what? I went into the bathroom, and not only did he unclog the pipes, but he cleaned the sink and vanity too. All without being asked, without complaining, and without a moment's hesitation. He even found all the tools and cleaning supplies on his own. I knew he was a keeper. We'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. Story 26. We went on a date to an arcade at an amusement park. I just wanted to play the games, but obviously you get tickets for prizes. We both ended up with a decent amount, but not enough for anything crazy, you know? Maybe a plastic toy or a handful of candy. I usually just give away my tickets, and I was about to suggest we do that, but he beat me to it. We should find a kid and give our tickets to them. I bet it'll make their day. My heart melted. Still together 3 years later. Story 27. Taking ownership of his own contributions to emotional labor within the relationship. I've never had a male partner before my current one who cares as much as I do about the emotional side of the relationship. I've always had to be the one who initiates the conversation when something needs to be discussed or apologize first when there's conflict. A few months into things with my current partner, we disagreed on something. Frequency of communication. He's not a big texter or communicator when not in person, whereas my point of view is that if we were only hanging out once a week, I wanted more interaction between that. We figured out a compromise, which was great. But even better was that he checked in with me about a month later and asked if our compromise was still working for me or if we needed to work on it further. I just found it so lovely and refreshing that he took the initiative to follow up. He's continued to be this accountable and conscientious towards my feelings, and it's one of the biggest reasons why I'm madly in love with him. These stories could be compiled into a handbook of how to be the best boyfriend or husband ever. Story 28. Over a decade ago, I was out with buddies at a house party. We were all around 25, 26. At the party, a girl is really interested in my friend and invites him into one of the bedrooms. He goes something like, "Sure, but how old are you?" And she says, 22. I figured he'd be satisfied with that, but he goes, "Sweet, do you have an ID on you?" And he actually checked it. I remember watching him hold up this girl's ID in her face to make sure it was really her. I asked him about it a while later, and he basically said, "She looked young and she was hot, but man, I'm not going to do anything, even if she wants it." You remember being a teen, right? We didn't know what the heck we were doing. The action of verifying her age was cool enough, but his reason not being entirely selfish really stood out too. Story 29. During the fall semester of my sophomore year of college, I was taking general chemistry and getting my butt whooped by it. My scientific calculator, which I've had for years and I value very much, helped me tremendously throughout chemistry. I ended up misplacing it one day. I didn't realize it until I was doing homework and came across a problem where I needed it. I tore my dorm room apart looking for this calculator, and this whole time I'm on the phone with my now boyfriend. He knew the toll Chem was taking on me and how much I needed this calculator. He told me the next day he'd find my calculator, and I insisted that he didn't have to do that. I'd actually ended up leaving it in my chemistry classroom. He went to my classroom, called my professor, who was very intimidating, by the way, and even searched the lost and found for my calculator. He brought it to me the next day with a note inside telling me that he loved me and that he was my Superman. Nobody else would have done anything like that for me, except for him. Story 30. Me and my husband met working at a local newspaper. One day, before we were even dating, we both got assignments that were going to take us out of office. It was raining pretty hard that day, and his assignment was earlier than mine. Before he left, I said something like, "Good luck in the gross weather. I hate how small our parking lot is. I'm sure when we both get back, our spots will be taken and we'll have to find street parking and walk back to the office in the pouring rain." He laughed and left. When I got back from my assignment later that day, to my shock, there was a single spot in the lot for me to park. I thought it was my lucky day, parked and carried on. Months later, I learned from a coworker he got back from his assignment, noticed there was only one spot in the lot, parked in the street and walked back in the rain to make sure there would be a spot for me when I got back after him. We just celebrated 5 years of marriage and I'm still down as bad as the day we got together. Story 31. My hubby of 22 years when we first started dating brought me a rose and the DVD of my favorite movie because I offhandedly mentioned what it was. It was The Princess Bride and brought a card in which he wrote, "As you wish." He is still the same after 22 years. He randomly walks up to me and kisses me, tells me I look more beautiful every day, and still opens my doors. He's genuinely kind and he truly loves me and tells me all the time. We, like any other couple, definitely have our ups and downs over the years, but I always go back to he keeps trying, he loves me, and we support one another. We just had a conversation over the weekend that dating in today's world sounds horrible, so we're both committed to making our marriage work. Lol. Story 32. I had a full house of guests, mostly friends and my housemates. Somehow we ended up in a very loud, slightly aggressive conversation about music. I don't have a favorite song. He couldn't accept that. He said something about loving country music, and I had this overwhelming flash of grief and excused myself to cry a little and calm down. I had lost two uncles barely a week apart, and I haven't really listened to country since the third pass before lockdown. He came and checked on me, gave me a hug, and tried to stop, and I tried to explain it really wasn't his fault. It was sweet, especially as we've only met like twice. When I came back out, another guy, a friend, checked on me quietly, too. Then, like an hour later, the first guy was hyping up the second guy, telling him he had a massive cake, which was also pretty adorable and sweet. Story 33. After dating somebody for years who I had to beg, plead, and convince to do anything, I was surprised how easy it was to get my new partner to say yes. My previous partner also would only spend time with me in chunks, so I was shocked that my partner now likes seeing me every day. It sounds small, but I was so used to no or not now, maybe, etc. That I would pre-plan my pleads in advance, but I was shocked when my new partner just did things or went with things so easily. I mentioned I wanted to go to a concert. He said okay, pulled out his phone and bought tickets on the spot. I said I wanted to try a new restaurant, and he said, let's go tonight. And if things aren't that easy, he'll make a plan for how we can get what I want in the future. It makes me realize how sad and unfulfilling my last relationship was that I had to beg him to spend time with me. Story 34. I wasn't just one guy. It was multiple. When I was in high school, I wasn't popular, but almost everyone still knew my face. I had a gym class my senior year, and at the beginning of that class, the teacher had us divide ourselves into two groups for certain days when we would just stay inside and play something. My group was mostly boys. One indoor game we played a lot was soccer. Being the shy person I am and not liking to be in the spotlight, I was goalie every time. Over time, I realized I was good at it. I frequently blocked attempted goals. One particular day, someone else on my team wanted to try goalie. You know what happened? After a little bit of playing, a good chunk of my male teammates say to him, "Get out the goal, dude, and let Julia in. She does a much better job than you." For once in my time at high school, I'd been recognized like that. It just uplifted me and made me feel good about myself. I'll never understand how much that gave me confidence and that I still think about it to this day. Story 35. I'm not a feminine woman. I'm ornery and used to be more athletic just to set the stage, so this makes more sense as to why it was so impactful. I was also out of the military, semi-recently to the incident. I used to have a big mouth and this guy was getting in my face. I don't remember if it was at a bar or a backyard, but beer was involved. It was maybe 6 inches to 12 inches taller than me. Not hard, I'm 5'5". And it was pretty obvious he thought I should somehow kowtow to whatever he said because he was a man. Anyway, I ended up looking him in the eye, serious, mind you, and telling him I could kick his bum. Well, this angered the guy pretty bad. How I remember it was like a vignette, with the guy's face 2 feet away, me staring at him, everything else out of focus, then suddenly from the right side of my husband's face slides in from nowhere and says, "She can. I've seen her spar." He had seen me spar. At least that much is true. This apparently confused the hell out of the guy. He had been drinking, remember? He got this dumb look in his face, stood there with his mouth open, and the next thing I knew, we were leaving. He stood up for me, but he also knew I could take care of myself and voiced that at the same time. It made me feel like he had my back if I needed him, but he had confidence that I could take care of myself. That was the last time anyone has ever pushed me that far, so it's not a common thing. And I'm not one who ever wants to fight or goes looking for them. I did thank him a bit later as we left, and he just said, "No problem. You would do the same for me." He didn't make a big deal about it or act like he was my knight in shining armor. Story 36. I'm very used to toxic relationships. Actually got with my now fiancé as a last-ditch effort to be in a happy relationship, which I was 99% sure wouldn't work. Before I could go on about my life being a promiscuous cat lady, I remember the first time I brought up something he did that I didn't like, and while I was sitting there expecting some big blowout affair of an argument, instead, he looked at me and said, "Yeah, you're right, actually. I do need to work on that. We can probably come to some sort of compromise in the meantime." I was so speechless. I also have Raynaud's disease, which means my hands are always cold. He will stop what he's doing to individually warm my hands with his, no matter how long it takes. Story 37. It was a new relationship, so I only knew the polished side of him. We were driving in his hometown in the countryside. Far from anything and not in a rush, but we had a lot to do that day. Suddenly, we get a flat tire. I start to panic inside. What will happen now? He very calmly pulls over, asks if I'm okay, and then matter-of-factly just says that, "You got a flat." No screaming, no yelling, no tantrums. Just got out and continued our conversation while he changed the spare and we continued our day, even if a bit delayed. I was so impressed by his maturity and how well he handled it. That moment, I knew that this guy would be the best partner in a crisis and I knew he was the one. I'd never felt that safe in my life. Story 38. My friend and I went out to have tea. The place was very, very crowded and I was waiting in the line to place my order. After that, I took the coupon and was trying to get close to the counter to share the coupon with the folks preparing the order. Somehow people were just getting in the way and I wasn't able to get closer to the counter. This one guy, tall and strong, who was already near the counter, moved aside, making some place for me and told me, "You can come here." I went ahead and replied, "Thank you." I know it's a very small gesture, but this made me realize that there are people out there who genuinely show kindness even when no one's watching. As a side note, I think he was trying to initiate conversation at the counter, but I just didn't understand. He even tried to stand close to me and my friend, and I still didn't pick up the hint. Or maybe I'm just being delusional and he didn't have anything in his mind. Lol. Story 39. Very early into dating, my current partner, we made dinner together at mine. I just moved into the house with a friend and we were still kidding out our place. We legit only had 2 spoons for some reason, so I had to wash them after I used them for cooking and needed them for dessert. Next time he came over, he bought a pack of spoons and a few other kitchen items that I mentioned I needed, all in my favorite sage green color. I never had someone notice small stuff like that before and do it without being asked because they genuinely care. I fell in love with them pretty quickly for that quality and so much more. Story 40. Just a few weeks after we started dating, I went on a 4-month academic exchange. We still Skyped once a week when I had decent Wi-Fi, but I told him there was no expectation of sticking around. When I got home, I went over to his place to see him. On his dining room table were gifts for all the holidays I'd been away for. Champagne for New Year's, chocolates for Valentine's, a case of beer for St. Patty's, and he sent me on a hunt for chocolate eggs around his place while he and his chef roommate made us breakfast. It was astounding. I'd never felt so welcome, wanted, missed, or cared for by any of my past boyfriends, and I'd barely known this guy a few weeks before leaving town. We had been together 10 years as of last December. Story 41. I dated this guy. Tall, handsome, successful, and he never even threw a slight glance at another woman if we were at a party or outside. His eyes would be stuck on me, while I'd be looking all around. He unfollowed and removed 90% of the people on his Insta, including girls he's talked to before without me ever mentioning anything related. He asked me which parts of myself were unhealed so that he can love those parts the most. He asked me to tell him everything that I like and everything that I don't so that he knows how to make me happy. He told the stars to keep me safe while he went on a business vacation for a week. I jokingly mentioned liking other girls' posts, and he never again liked another pic. We broke up. He still doesn't like other girls' pics. Story 42. I said the L word after a night of drinking and intense intimacy. I was having a very emotional day and a lot was going on, so I asked him to come over. This was due to the heat of the moment, plus already being very emotional, and I didn't really mean it at that point, but I was very embarrassed and I kept talking over him about how embarrassing it was. But he just held me, asked what happened during the day, and listened. Next morning, I left early for work. Texted him that he can just leave my apartment whenever and we don't have to talk about the whole I love you situation. He offered to stay back in mine, ordered pizza and got wine and told me we can have a chill anime night instead. And we did. Never really addressed it, and at that point, it was the perfect way to handle my emotional outburst. It didn't make me feel like it was a big deal whatsoever. So did you end up together? Story 43. This is me blowing my own trumpet. But at 45, my wife and I have finally gotten in the habit of talking to each other a bit more about feelings, etc. We talked about what we both found attractive in the other and what made us both want to progress. My wife told me that it was my gentle confidence in the way I spoke to her, people around us, friends, etc. She said without even meaning to hold friend groups together. I listened to people and people listened to me, and that I used that position generally for good rather than domination, making people feel good and included. She realized she was both attracted to this and actually realized she was becoming jealous of the time I made others feel good rather than her. So, from these slightly conflicted emotions, she realized she wanted to hog me because I made her feel good about herself. Very flattering and handy, as I'm an ugly little dumpling of a man. Story 44. Disagree with me politely, but didn't just turn on a dime and pretend he had different opinions because the pretty girl disagreed with him or tried to placate me. We had a standing date to do swing dancing, and the first day I was starving because I hadn't planned ahead. The next day, he brought a peanut butter sandwich with him, just in case. Took my feelings seriously. We were driving for several hours and his AC busted. I was suffering from heat. He stopped, bought packs of ice, and packed me in the car. He didn't expect me to suffer to make him feel better about his mistake. Knew what he wanted. Kids plus family, but wasn't willing to settle for a woman to get those things. Was holding out for quality. Believes in constant growth or change. None of this, that's just who I am crap. He didn't change his mind just to please me, but he was very eager to be right and knew that meant sometimes he was wrong. We once did research presentations on the value of X, political topic, because we disagree but respect the other person sufficiently to hear them out. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.